So let's review our agenda. First, we're going to kick things off by looking at the recent growth in e-commerce and then the resulting carbon emissions from that growth. We'll explain how our new carbon offset API works, how to add a carbon neutral delivery option for your customers to select and purchase, and then also how to purchase carbon offsets yourself for every shipment in your system. And then lastly, we'll open it up for a live Q&A, and you can ask anything you want. I want to let everyone know we're going to get through the agenda I described here and then pause to open up the webinar for questions at the end. So as we go through, please, we welcome all questions. Just write them down and then save them for the end and ask them. Additionally, we are recording this webinar, so don't feel like you need to be saving all these mental images of slides. We'll send it out after and you can go through. And then also please share it out to anyone who you think might benefit or is interested in learning more. Okay, thank you. Let's go ahead and get going. So I'll kick things off by talking about the growing carbon emissions from e-commerce. Let's start by looking at e-commerce sales volume over time. This is a really important proxy for the overall carbon emissions from e-commerce because roughly there's a linear correlation between sales and emissions. The more e-commerce sales that we see, the more carbon emissions that result from e-commerce. This chart shows that even with brick and mortar stores reopening in 2021, the upward trend in online retail sales continues to grow. E-commerce sales are shockingly almost double of what we saw in 2019 pre-COVID times. And shoppers are staying online. Online penetration has hovered around 20% over the last couple of years, meaning nearly $1 in every $5 spent on retail purchases originates from a digital order. And while online penetration of US retail sales took a slight dip in Q2 of last year relative to 2020 levels, it still remains elevated from the pandemic fueled changes in shopping behavior. Temporary store closures in Q2 2020 and lingering consumer anxiety over being in crowded spaces pushed many to shop on the web last year. Some for the first time, many in new categories, and nearly all more frequently. I personally can remember, for a little bit, not going into stores, not purchasing anything in person, and learning how to buy tons of new things that I needed for myself online. And many of those habits have stuck with me. And I think that's pretty common for a lot of the consumers out there. And all of that gave a really sizable boost to online penetration. And it's expected that e-commerce will continue to eat into retail sales each year moving forward. Okay, so what does this all add up to? A McKinsey report estimated that 64% of all carbon emissions come from the global supply chain. And that means when we think about the source of carbon emissions, we have to think about the supply chain and its components. And today, though e-commerce is a small piece of the pie compared to the other components in the supply chain, e-commerce sales are, as we talked about, expected to double in the next decade. So they're growing quickly. And another trend that's compounding on top of this is the consumer expectation of faster shipping. Right now, 42% of consumers expect 2-day shipping on every online purchase they make. That's largely driven by Amazon Prime, and that number is growing every year. And we'll talk about this later in the presentation, but that's an important trend because when you think about carbon emissions from parcel delivery, the mode of transportation plays a very, very big role. And essentially, if something ships via air, there's significantly more carbon emissions than if it goes via ground over the same distance traveled. So with faster shipping means more frequent air shipments, and then again, that results in more carbon emissions. And while today companies have the option to choose whether or not they want to reduce their carbon emissions and how they want to play a role in the increasing carbon emissions from e-commerce, that may change because the regulatory landscape is kind of shifting quite a bit right now. The US has ambitious carbon emission reduction targets set at the federal level. Currently, the administration is targeting a 50% reduction from 2005 levels by 2030, so just 8 years from now, and then net zero emissions by 2050. McKinsey examined what these regulations mean for the private sector, and they estimate CPG companies will need to reduce their carbon emission intensity by 92% from current levels to meet the 2050 targets. And we know 2050 is very distant, but it's important for us to acknowledge that change is coming, and we should start thinking about what we can do to adapt to this major change. And so the bottom line is this: carbon emissions from the e-commerce sector are growing, but we can take action to reduce our impact. And so that segues very, very nicely into our next section, where Claire will discuss our new carbon offset API.
Thanks, Travis. Our carbon offset API pairs perfectly with our shipping and rating API. So currently, to use our rating API, what you need to do is create a shipment. And to do that, you're submitting over to us your origin address details, your destination address details, as well as your parcel information, such as weight and dimensions. Now with carbon offset, it's almost exactly the same thing. Now with our rating API, you can calculate carbon emissions on parcel delivery for any given shipment. To do this, you just set this parameter carbon_offset, and you just set it as true when you create your shipment. So that's all you need to add. Once you do that, you'll get back a carbon offset object for each rate of your shipment. For each one of your shipments, you're going to get back a bunch of rates based on whatever carrier accounts you have integrated with EasyPost. And for each rate in your shipment, we'll return this carbon offset object with the estimated amount of grams of carbon the parcel is emitting, as well as the price to offset that amount of carbon. As of today, only shipments within the US are supported with our carbon offset API. So now that you have your rates, next step is to purchase the label as well as the carbon offset. To do this, you just set carbon_offset as true again if you want to purchase the offset. That's it, simple as that. You just purchased an offset to neutralize carbon emissions from parcel delivery. As you can see, our API is super simple to use. So here is the flow. So we just talked about step one, which is getting the rates, and step two, purchasing the label and the carbon offsets. So now what? Once you purchase that offset from EasyPost, we're going to put that money towards our portfolio of carbon offset projects, which Travis will tell you more about later. We also offer comprehensive reporting if you choose to use our carbon offset API. All of our reports are available both via the API as well as the EasyPost dashboard. You can use these reports to share internally the environmental impact you're making, or use that data to share externally and show off that environmental impact that you're making. The carbon offset API is free to access, and you just saw how simple it is yourself to implement it with EasyPost API. We have full client library support for this release. So if you want to use Python, Go, Java, Ruby, C#, Node.js, or PHP, we have that all built into our client libraries, and you can get up and running in minutes. In addition to EasyPost 99.99% uptime, our API response time is also the best in the industry. All right, I know what everyone's thinking. You're wondering, how are we calculating the carbon emissions for every shipment? So our API takes in a few different factors. We take inputs such as the distance traveled for your shipment, the carrier service you're selecting for the shipment, as well as the package weight and dimensions. These emission estimates come from EPA guidance. In addition, EasyPost partners very closely with our 100+ carriers. So we're going to continue to use new data as it comes in to improve our estimates.
We're really excited about our carbon offset project portfolio that's showing up here on this slide. And as you look around this slide, you'll notice that every project is very different from the other projects. We intentionally selected a very diverse portfolio to take advantage of some of the latest innovative carbon reduction technology. Every purchase made through the API will be distributed across this portfolio that you see here to offset the carbon emissions from the shipment. I'll tell you a little bit more about our projects now, but if you're curious to learn more, you can read about them on our website. We have these published there, and then there's a much more detailed description on the webpage where we describe these projects. And we will send out a link after the webinar so you can navigate there if you want to learn more. So starting with the grassroots carbon regenerative grazing project, this project incentivizes ranchers to use regenerative practices that produce a cleaner and healthier soil for the environment that lowers overall greenhouse gas emissions. The Big River and Salmon Creek Forest Protection Project preserves more than 15,000 acres of forests and rivers located in California. The Salto Pilao hydroelectric plant generates clean energy using hydroelectric power and a very low impact plant. And then lastly, the Uganda International Small Group Tree Planting Project leverages a powerful network of smallholder Ugandan farmers to plant millions of trees. And while our carbon offset projects cover a wide range of technologies, every project follows one of the modern and trusted carbon reduction standards listed here. The verified carbon standard is a full-fledged global carbon offset program developed and run by the nonprofit Vera and is founded in 2005. So it's kind of a long established standard. The Climate Action Reserve is another very, very robust and long established carbon offset standard, but it's specifically focused on serving projects in North America. And then Puro.earth is the world's first B2B marketplace, standard, and registry focused solely on carbon removal. And then lastly, the B Carbon standard redefines unnecessarily strict requirements for landlords in order to catalyze the impact of voluntary carbon markets. So it's really cool. They do this because nature-based carbon credits have historically been impractical for landowners in the US, and they're looking to drive more adoption from that sector because there's just obviously a ton of land and a lot of potential there. So they're trying to incentivize new ways to offset carbon using sort of the resources in the US. And then these standards are also linked on our website, and we'll send out, we'll send out a link so you can go and learn more about these. So now that you kind of understand how the carbon offset API functions, we're going to talk about some of the ways customers are implementing the API. Let's first talk about this use case of adding a carbon neutral delivery option for your customers to select and purchase. And I want to begin about talking about something commonly underestimated: consumers' desire for eco-friendly products and offerings. Multi-channel Merchant found that more than 50% of consumers are willing to pay 10% more for an eco-friendly shipping option. Further, online brands have seen a 15% lift in conversion rates at checkout when an eco-friendly shipping option is displayed. And then lastly, IBM found 70% of consumers are willing to pay a premium for brands that support recycling, practice sustainability, and are environmentally responsible.
And it can be completely free to you. Since we provide the carbon price estimate upfront, you can display that at time of checkout to your customers. You can charge your customers that extra fee on that checkout page if they want to use carbon neutral shipping, or you can add it to the shipping rate. It's up to you how you want to do it. This way, you can enjoy the benefits of being an eco-friendly brand while having this new feature completely free to you. If you're an e-commerce platform, you can provide the same functionality I just mentioned to your customers as well. You can provide this carbon offset feature to them and let them toggle it on and off depending on what they want to do, and also let them choose where and how they want to display that rate and collect that extra money from the end shippers.
Now we'll move on to discussing the second use case here, where the EasyPost customer, you purchased a carbon offset to neutralize emissions from parcel delivery. And again, I'm going to start by reviewing some really compelling statistics that kind of demonstrate the power of a brand that is thought of as eco-friendly. So McKinsey found in a survey that 66% of millennials take into account a brand's sustainability prior to making a purchase. And as millennials continue to represent a larger and larger portion of the consumer pie, this millennial trait will increase in significance. IBM did a deep dive on consumer types and found that 40% identified as purpose-driven consumers. This is because consumers in this group primarily choose products and services based on alignment with their values. As we see consumers continue to care more and more about sustainability in the environment, this sentiment will have tremendous impacts for the e-commerce industry. Today, 57% of consumers would change their purchasing behavior to help reduce their environmental impact. And we expect, based on all the statistics we just reviewed, this number will continue to improve and grow in the coming years.
Yeah, so our second use case is where you purchase the carbon offsets out of your own pocket. So to do that on your checkout page, you just continue doing whatever you're doing now with showing your shipping rates. However, when you create that label with EasyPost, you can pass that extra carbon offset parameter I mentioned earlier to neutralize your parcel delivery emissions. Now you can enjoy the extra benefits of customers knowing and being rest assured that their shipment is carbon neutral. I know I see it a lot when I'm shopping online. I see that little badge or that notice on checkout that the brand I'm buying from is carbon neutral, or they're offsetting the carbon from, that shipment that I just purchased from them. And it makes me happy that I'm buying from an eco-friendly brand. So with EasyPost, we can help power your shipping and help make all your shipments carbon neutral. So you can add that badge to your checkout page as well and make your customers feel good.
And we made it easy for you to market. So in case it's helpful, you can find downloadable badges on our website, and you can place them wherever makes the most sense for you, your website, storefront, checkout page. But we definitely highly recommend marketing this technology if you elect to use it. And after hearing all these stats and metrics about consumers and brands and where the market is going, we hope it comes as no surprise to see major companies in the e-commerce space like Walmart, Amazon, Best Buy, and Apple all pledging to go carbon neutral. Not only does it help the environment, which is fantastic, make consumers happy, but also has profound impacts for their brand. And we hope it won't break the bank. Most shipments in EasyPost cost somewhere in the range of 11 cents to 25 cents to offset the carbon emissions from parcel delivery. So if you're interested, which we strongly hope you are, the API is available to all customers now. It can be accessed using our intuitive API documentation, which we'll again send out a link after the call or after the webinar. And we know that many of you may be taking your first step towards adding an eco-friendly component to your offering. So our goal with this API is to ease that transition. Not only can it be completely free for you, but implementations can also be incredibly speedy. And so we're hoping that this API can be a great value add for our customers before the peak season.
Thanks everyone for joining us today. At this point, we'll open up the live Q&A, so feel free to type in your questions and we'll get to answering them. Thank you guys again for all coming.
All right.